Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's going to be reviewing Mr. Morale and the Big Stepper by Kendrick Lamar. As you can tell from my title and my thumbnail, I started off real clickbaity with this question. But is it a masterpiece? Is Kendrick Lamar's new album as good as his last four, and does it deserve that title of masterpiece? Now, it's sort of unintentional, but on this channel I've sort of used that word. Like, I don't give scores, I don't give grades, I just give you my thoughts. But every once in a while, an album, because I only review things that I like, but every once in a while, an album will separate itself from the other things that I like. This year has been amazingly productive in terms of things that I would consider to be masterpieces. January we saw Black Country New Roads, Ants from Up There, which I consider to be a masterpiece. By that I mean like a near perfect album that is both innovative and creative, that is smart and emotional, that's able to do everything that music can do, especially good music, all at once. February then saw The Weeknd's album, which it didn't get a lot of love, but I think it's a masterpiece. I think Dawn FM is a masterpiece, and it seemed like there was going to be one a month, because then Stromae came out with Multitude, which I also believe to be a masterpiece according to those criteria of simultaneously emotional and intellectual engagement. Right? That's what I love most in music. And so, April there wasn't one, but here we are in May, and the real question is that what this album is? And in the context of his last albums, in which his last three albums are masterpieces, according to that metric, at least in my opinion. So is it really as good? Is this double album just as good? Of course it is! Of course! Have you heard Crown? Have you heard the song Crown? I get it, you heard the song Crown. But have you listened to the song Crown again? If the answer to that question in your mind while you're watching this video is no, listen to Crown one more time. I dare you, I double dog dare you to listen to Crown one more time. Now the funny thing is, I was thinking about this intro, and I wanted to use a swear. I wanted to say, of course it's a masterpiece, you dip S-words. That's one of my favorite swear words. I don't swear on this channel, dip-ish. But I'm like, well, I'm not going to swear. So I thought, well, what if I looked up other words? Like, what if I looked up sort of for old insults? You pillock, you ninny hammer, you donkey brains. But then I found the perfect word. And this is a word which I'm using, and I'm being a little bit facetious. If you don't think this album is a masterpiece, I totally understand. And I was very reluctant at first as well. So I want to kind of talk you through this. But what I'm going to call you, I'm not going to call you a pillock. I'm going to call you a smell fungus. Did I just call you a smell fungus? What's a smell fungus? Smell fungus is an old insult from 1768, coined by the British writer Lawrence Sterne. And what a smell fungus is that person who has like a very ill nature, like he's very pessimistic, and he's always looking for faults. He's a habitual fault finder. I think our expectations, mine included, for this album are so high that our first listen, our second listen, our third listen, we are all smell fungi. We are all just there, and we're listening to this, and we have so many expectations, and we've lived with Kendrick's albums for the last few years, and we have all these feelings that all we can do is just be a smell fungus. So let's move past. I think it was my 8th listen through. It's been a busy weekend. I'm recording this at like right around noon on Sunday, and the album came out at midnight on Friday, and I first listened to it at 1:30 a.m. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, well, Sky, why didn't you listen to it at midnight? I wasn't planning. I had to go to graduation. See, I am a full-time French professor. That is my job. And graduation, a couple of my students were graduating, and I wanted to be there and celebrate for all of them, And so I had to get up at 6 a.m. to get to graduation. It's a long thing. So I went to sleep at like 10:30 on Friday night, and I thought, I'm not going to stay up to listen to Kendrick. But I was literally so excited about the new Kendrick album that I couldn't fall asleep. I was thinking about The Heart Part 5, I was thinking about the title, I was thinking about the cover, and I gave myself insomnia until I finally gave up, and at 1:30 I put on my Fight Club bathrobe, went downstairs, drank some milk, and listened to the first 3 songs. I couldn't. you know? And so part of what I'm going to be sharing with you is a little bit of my experience of living with the album. I imagine your experience is not quite the same as mine, because I wanted to come out with something good and meaningful, but I also wanted to come out quickly because I'm arrogant enough to think that my opinions might help other people's enjoyment of the art that I talk about. Maybe I'm being realistic. Maybe I'm being arrogant. I don't know. Please feel free to tell me in the comments. Smash the like bucket and subscribe. So I'm going to be taking you through my listenings, and I'm going to be sharing a lot of my thoughts, a lot of my opinions of it. But just right off front, yes, you Smellfungi, this is a masterpiece. This is a gigantic, colossal masterpiece of empathy and humanity, which he teased with The Heart Part 5. You can see my review. Click on the banana to watch my review of The Heart Part 5. I think it's pretty good. Actually, a lot of my predictions from there didn't come true, but I think in a more interesting way. So let's just go through some items, some parts of this album, okay? Let's talk a little bit about this cover. I almost did an entire video just about this cover. It is a great cover. I still think the Future cover is better than this. I don't know why I love that cover so much, that Future album, but artistically, I would say this is superior. And I've read a little bit of the discourse around it, and I really want to emphasize some more. So it turns out this is his family. These are his kids and his fiance, or maybe wife. I don't know. I don't read celebrity gossip. But, you know, the fact that he's wearing a crown of thorns, it's interesting. You know, in my Heart Part 5 video, I called him the Messiah, and I was sort of half joking, and then this ended up sort of being true, so that's kind of funny. But I want to spend a little bit more time with this image and put it into proper context to understand what this is. Now, I think very clearly what this is a inversion or a conversion or a subversion of Madonna and Child. Okay, so Madonna and Child is one of, if not the most repeated image in Western art. Okay, I mean, it is everywhere, everywhere, at least through the Renaissance, hundreds of years, and past the Renaissance, hundreds of years of people painting the mother of Jesus and baby Jesus. So what makes this interesting is that a lot of this album is about fatherhood. And if you think about it, Madonna and Child is one of the great absent father portraits of all time, right? I mean, Jesus had an absent father, right? He had a great stepfather with Joseph, but his father was God and had a different relationship with God, and that kind of weird relationship. I'm not trying to be sacrilegious. I'm being a little bit goofy here, so don't take it too seriously if you're a Christian, like I am. But it's an interesting idea, I think, because this album is a lot about fatherhood and about adulthood and about the responsibilities that come with it. So I think Kendrick putting himself as Jesus and as being a father, because we have a traditional, this over here, if the cover was just this, then we would have an interesting update of Madonna and Child. We would have the mother and the child suckling, right? We'd have all that. But by having this up front, I think makes it a much more interesting and challenging cover. And it's not just imitating Madonna and Child. It's putting it in a different context of this family, of this black family, that is coming to terms with the trauma that is implied by the bullet holes behind them that have been patched up poorly in a house, by the defensiveness and the need to have a gun, as you see tucked into his waist. So it's sort of everything that we're going to be seeing in the album, dealing with past trauma, coming to terms with adulthood, coming to terms with family, coming to terms with one's responsibility, and this idea of Christ. But not just Christ as a sacrificial figure. What makes this album so great, I think, is that if we could boil it down to one of its essences, is he's describing how he is becoming the Christ of paternity, not the Christ of the culture. He's making it very clear he is not going to sacrifice himself, his life, for hip-hop culture, for African-American culture, for American culture. He's not going to do that. That's what people want, but that's not what he's going to do. And that's what he announces. And as we're going to see, somewhat paradoxically, by not making that sacrifice, by not being the Christ of the culture, he may actually do much better good for the culture itself. So he's become something of the Christ of paternity. Now, if you are somebody like me with a doctorate in French, and you see somebody as a father who paints himself as Christ, you immediately go to one place. Now, I'm not saying that this is an intentional reference. I don't think it is. But I think it's an important parallel that we can draw between Kendrick Lamar and Honoré Balzac and his masterpiece, Le Père Goriot, The Father Goriot. I keep using the term, the Christ of paternity, because that's what shows up in this book. It's a story about a lot of different things. It's about capitalism, it's about fatherhood, it's about Activism, it's all about a whole bunch of things. But one of the main figures is this father, who very consciously calls himself and is referred to as the Christ of paternity, because he cares so much for his daughters, and they ultimately don't care that much about him, that he sacrifices himself, his entire life, to his family. I remember when I read this book, I had a baby, my son, who's now 16, but that's when I was reading this book. And I remember we had a thing called the diaper genie, which is like this weird series of plastic bags where you put diapers in them and you twist them up. And I had a long string of these diapers. And I had my bathrobe on, and I had someone take a picture of me as a portrait. And I titled it The Christ of Paternity. Because when you're a father, and this is true when you're a mother too, I'm sure, right? The feeling of sacrifice that you have, the glorious sacrifice that you have, that you're giving for your kids, the way that you are putting their needs ahead of yours, the way that you are subjugating yourself to this greater good. It's not that far from a religious calling. It really isn't. And you have this feeling of just, I don't think that I'm Jesus, right? And Kendrick doesn't think that he's Jesus. That's not the point. If you think that's the point, you're thinking too literally. But Jesus as a figure who can save humanity through his sacrifice. Every present father, every present mother, to a certain degree, is somebody who sacrifices themselves in the name of humanity. And this whole album is filled with parents and generations of parents who are unable or unwilling to make those sacrifices. It's funny because the other way that I listened to this album, my daughter had a regatta. Okay, I don't know, decided to row. What can you do? Your kids are going to do what they're going to do, And it took 3.5 hours to drive there. And if you're from Schenectady, New York, I'm sure you have a nice town. But I took a wrong turn. I got lost in Schenectady, New York, driving around the goddamn IBM factory in a little loop. I ended up in Saratoga where it was. It's a fine place. But I'm spending like 7 hours of driving, and I'm getting the hotel room. And then if you've ever been to a regatta, you don't do anything. You just stand there and you hope to see if someone lends you binoculars, you can maybe see your kid going for like a minute and a half, and you spend your entire day. And by the way, my grading is due on Wednesday. I have to hand in my final grades on Wednesday. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, I'm as pale as a sheet. That's just my standing. That's just my resting complexion. And the sun was beating down. And I had to just I'm still a little bit red. The redder the berry, the higher the views. That's my hope. I still have a little sunburn. You can kind of tell when you press there. It didn't matter how many times I kept reapplying. I was sitting there, I was baking in the sun, and I was trying to grade, and I thought to myself, here I am again, the Christ of paternity, sacrificing my day, sacrificing my desires to get this, to get a happy daughter. Who won a medal. Okay? That's what I get. That's my reward. And that's her reward. That's her sense of well-being. That's her sense of accomplishment. That's me doing the work that it takes to not further any generational trauma, which I have suffered from greatly, which I have overcome through therapy. We'll get to that in a little bit. What I love about this whole Christ of paternity thing that he has going on here is he doesn't actually brag about his parenting. Like, he doesn't say, I'm so great and I went and I bought diapers and I changed this. It's really about the idea that he is of not sacrificing himself for the culture. And when he says in the final song, I chose me, I'm sorry, he's not actually choosing him, he's choosing his family, which fundamentally all ties in by leading by example, I'll get to that soon too, as a way to save the culture. This album, if it is listened to and given the seriousness that it deserves, and in which it's earned, it will do more for human culture, including African American culture, including greater hip hop culture, including youth culture, white culture, American culture, international culture, all cultures. If they actually listen to this album and actually take in its lessons, it will do way more than had he done what everybody wanted him to do. Now, I've covered the cover. Now Jesus Christ. 15 minutes in, Sky? 15 minutes in, you haven't even said a single thing about... I haven't even explained why I have a bootleg Transformer behind me. It's cool. You guys are here, right? You guys are here to ride with me. Tell me you'll ride with me in the comments and smash the like bucket again. Why not? Don't smash it again because then you'll unlike it. I don't know how it works. We'll get to the title. I want to talk about Mr. Morale. Again, I don't think this is on purpose, but it could be. Morale is a complicated word because morale and morality are often connected. Morale meaning like the sense of the temperament of a group. But what's interesting is morale and morality go back to a Latin word, which in French has a slightly different connotation. So before there were sort of like philosophers, before that was a term that was often used in France, they would use the term moralist. And that doesn't mean someone who told you what was good and what was bad. It was somebody who would observe humanity and discuss humanity, discuss the mores, the habits of people. So that's the etymological root of morale, is to observe and discuss people's habits in society. And so I think, here's some good books that I had to read for my doctorate, Morale durant siècle. And in particular, my favorite moralist, Blaise Pascal, who we'll be coming back to a lot later, I think this album's actually quite Pascalian, which maybe I'll write a paper about that someday. I don't know. So I think that's an important thing, where he's both somebody who is trying to be there and trying to be a figure to boost morale, but also I think he's making very cogent thoughts about humanity, about people's inner workings, about why people do what they do, the sometimes hidden reasoning behind our actions, usually framed by Copes. Then we get to Big Stepper. I don't know. Big Stepper is tricky. I can't tell if he's criticizing the concept of being a big stepper or embracing it. To a certain extent, I think he's maybe attacking the concept of being a big stepper because it's sort of an achievement, and as we'll see, it's not that important to achieve. That's actually not that noble of a goal on this album, but I'm not sure. Hey, do you want me to say something negative about this album? I will. It's not really negative, though, so I tricked you. Kendrick Lamar has lost his fastball. He does not rap with the same level of technical superiority that he did when he took his hiatus from the game at Damn. You know how you can study Kendrick Lamar and how we do study Kendrick Lamar in poetry classes, and we have all the highlights of all the interior rhymes and the exterior rhymes, and you just look at it and you weep at its gorgeousness? He's not doing that on this album. He rhymes the word talking 3 times with itself. One time, he has an entire verse where he doesn't rhyme at all. But I don't think it's because he can't do it. Or I don't think it actually matters. See, I use the term fastball, and I'm going to be talking about a lot of 17th century philosophy and sports metaphors. Really good pitchers in baseball, right? Like most really good young pitchers have a great 4-seam fastball, just a really wicked fastball. But as they get older, their elbows get messed up, their shoulders get messed up, their arms weaken, you get older. And you can't throw the fastball as well. The top level pitchers compensate by start throwing a different arsenal of pitches. CC Sabathia did this. Maybe the most interesting example is Bob Welch, who is an alcoholic who cured himself from alcoholism and then was in a mental place to be able to start pitching better, and he couldn't rely on his fastball, and so he created a much better changeup. I mean, this is really old baseball. I had to ask my friend Brock for some baseball advice because I couldn't pull the name Bob Welch out myself. But it's a fascinating thing because you can be just as effective of a pitcher even without that fastball. And Kendrick Lamar is just as effective of a rapper as he is without his fastball, without his amazing technical abilities. And he's able to do that because I think he might be a worse rapper, but this album has shown him to be a better artist, a more complete artist. He's relying more on his singing. He's relying more on this viewpoint that he has. And also, I'm just being a smell fungus. How many new flows are on this album? How often does he still mix these flows? I mean, okay, he's throwing his fastball less often, but he's integrated a knuckleball, a Nephis pitch, okay? It's crazy. He has like flows on here that we've never heard him do before. On the whole, this album reminds me a lot, in a positive way, of Donda. In its search for healing, its search for therapy, its search for self-improvement. Unlike Donda, I think it's a successful movement towards healing. And in that way, it reminds me of an album from a couple of years ago by the British rapper Dave called Psychodrama. A great album that's all based around going through therapy and becoming a better man, which this album is as well. But what I want to do is talk about what this album does better than any other album I've ever heard. He actually talks about real self-improvement, about how to become a man. But not just a man, how to become an adult. And this album lays it all out for you. And it's through his work in therapy, it's through his work on himself, it's applying the intelligence that he's always had in his raps and his rhymes and his business acumen and everything. And it's applying to the steps that it takes to become an adult. And here's the thing, a lot of my audience is young people, okay? You're between the ages of 18 and 31, most of you. You're not here yet. But this is how. Kendrick is telling you how to do it. And I'll tell you how to do it too. And you might need the help of a good therapist. I saw my therapist for 12 years. It was great. He was a great therapist. I don't need to see him anymore. I'm a lot more stable. I'm a lot better place in my life. But these are the stages that I took, and these are the stages that he outlines on this album. Number one, you have to process your trauma. You have to accept that it happened. You have to define it. You have to accept it, and you have to own it. You can't say, it wasn't that bad. I didn't get hit. I was only this. I didn't get raped. I was only that. I didn't get... No. Just stop talking about what didn't happen and talk about what did happen. Then you have to take responsibility for the ways that you coped for your trauma hurt others. So I had to process my trauma. When I wasn't processing it, I coped. Those coping mechanisms involved hurting other people. You have to take responsibility for that, as Kendrick does. At that point, you can forgive yourself, which is the hardest and most important step on this whole thing. You have to love yourself and forgive yourself. That way you can love and forgive others. You then have to achieve some kind of real stability that's based around your growth and your connection to others. The stability can't come from having a good job or from buying lots of stuff, from having lots of money, for having lots of success. It has to come through connection to others, such as with his kids and with his wife, such as with my kids and with my wife. And finally, you have to learn how to enforce boundaries. People around you may not understand that you've changed. They might not understand how you've changed. And they might try to kind of engage with parts of you that you don't want to engage. They might try to ask you to accept things that you don't find acceptable. And you have to enforce boundaries. And dear God, if this album is not the most boundary enforcing album I have ever heard, this album might as well just be called, hey everybody, these are my boundaries, please respect them. Okay? Like that's what this album is. It's a lot of that. And it might seem selfish, and he phrases it in the context of selfishness, but it's not. His empathy stems from here. Radical empathy, which is what our world needs to heal, it begins by loving yourself and forgiving yourself for your own weaknesses. You have no hope. If I can't forgive myself for being preachy or for being anxious or for being arrogant or whatever it is, then I have no hope of being a good parent. I can't forgive my kids for their stuff. I can't work with them. So that's what he did. You smell fungi. What other, I'm not going to say rapper, what other musician has achieved at this level with this depth and complexity and listenability as he has with this album? And this is where I really, really, really want to take people to task. Don't you dare call this album preachy. You can call To Pimp a Butterfly preachy if you want. I don't think it is, but you can. But you cannot call this album preachy. It is the opposite of preachy. He's leading by example. He is showing, not telling, what to do. And by that, I'm sorry, I have to... Toby's over there and he's licking himself. I don't want you to hear him licking. So if I'm not going to throw the slipper at him, but if I show him the slipper, he usually stops. Toby. Okay, we'll see if he stops. Oh my God, he's so cute. Let me see if you can look at him. You see him? How cute is he? You're a good boy, Toby. Sorry. Now that's excessive. It's not preachy. Because he leads by example, he shows how to do it. He's not saying you need to do this and you need to do that. He's just saying I did this and this is why I had to do that. So in addition to all of this great all this psychological work that he's doing, is another theme, which is that of self-help and the presence of German self-help guru Eckhart Tolle. Now, I watched a lot of Eckhart Tolle over this weekend while I was driving. Oh, now he's licking again. You don't care, right? Tell me in the comments you don't care. I watched a lot of Eckhart Tolle stuff. It's all on YouTube. And it's great. It's all about like how your thinking can poison you, how we all have an internal voice that even when we don't hear it, it's actually acting on us. It talks about how we sort of write scripts for ourselves, about the ways that we perpetuate trauma and perpetuate bad things in our lives. And to this, and also interestingly, he talks about the internal voices, how sometimes our internal voices say you, and sometimes they say I. So, you really messed up. I didn't know any better. It reminds me a little bit of To Pimp a Butterfly with the song You and I. I don't know. And to this I say, why not? Why not have self-help? I mean, self-help gets a lot of flack for being bad pseudoscience, but I don't think it is. I think it's important. I think it really helps people out. I have a lot of self-help books, even though I go to therapy, and even though I consider myself to not need things like that. Why not? The thing is, the people who Kendrick Lamar is talking to, on a certain level, we can say he is talking to the African American community, which has less access to psychological services, right? That's just a financial fact. That's just a fact. They have less access to quality psychological services. In addition, they have more exposure and more generational trauma to cope with, okay? So we have mo problems, less money, right? So that's an issue. But he's not really actually on that. Like, I think this is actually not about that. I think this is for everybody. I think this is for all human beings, even if you have lots of access. Most people have access to therapy. Very few people take advantage of it. So it's not only that he's helping that, but also like a population which perhaps has less tendency to go towards self-help. By necessity, has had to believe more in self-reliance and less in understanding and coming to terms with any form of weakness, because any form of weakness that you accept might be a form of weakness that takes you down, right? So it's really possible that this is an intentional sort of two-pronged attack. And again, oh, Kendrick, what are you doing for America? What are you doing for Black Americans now? Why did you step out? He's leading by example. He's very, very clearly doing it by showing this need for therapy, by giving this list of things that you have to do without making it into a list, and then by showing these needs of what can you do with self-help. It's interesting because, Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about like dwelling on unhappiness and really about a lack of mindfulness. And that's where I'm going to come back to Blaise Pascal, the 17th century French philosopher, moralist, quite a bit, because he writes a lot about this as well, about a lack of mindfulness, about our need, that all of our happiness comes from the fact that we cannot sit alone in a room, that we can't sit in front of a mirror and look at ourselves. Like that kind of torment that comes from being mindful is a long-standing thing. And Eckhart Tolle, Kendrick Lamar, Pascal, all trying to push us towards that. It's also worth mentioning that Eckhart Tolle came to prominence through Oprah Winfrey. And it's funny because at one point on this album, Kendrick calls himself Oprah. And it could be that we might actually see this album as Kendrick becoming he Oprah. I've been trying to come up with a word for that. Man Oprah. I don't know how to do that. Oprah. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do that. But Oprah is an amazing figure. They should just tear down Mount Rushmore and just put Oprah up there for what she has done for helping. Again, what Oprah does is what Kendrick is doing. Of course, Oprah's influence is so important, especially for the African American community that's been underserved, undertreated, misunderstood, not treated with the same level of sensitivity and seriousness as the rest of the country. Therefore, it's been underserved. So she really helped to put that into the forefront. But that really primarily has a female audience, not so much a male audience. And I think a lot of this idea of sort of self-love and boundaries and growth, it feels like that's what Kendrick is doing. Okay, 2 more quick points here. I told my family this would take like an hour. You know how long this is going to take. I don't. I get this. It's going to be more than an hour. I like how Lucy from To Pimp a Butterfly, who was this female incarnation of temptation and Satan, has been replaced by Whitney, his fiance or wife. I don't know. The mother of his children. I really like that because it's a similar sort of allegorical figure. I mean, Whitney is a real person and we hear her actual voice, but she's very allegorical as a connection, like a representation of human connection. Like the reward for following all these things back here, and I can tell you from personal experience, the reward is a good life where you're a happy adult, okay? Which is the greatest reward that you could possibly have. I could win the lottery 10 times in a row and be attacked by the most beautiful women in the world at all times, and I would never have 1/10 of the happiness as I have from following these basic ideas. This human connection I have to my wife and to my kids. And I love that Whitney here is represented as a positive figure to go towards, as opposed to a negative figure. It's funny because his tone can be so cynical at times, but this actually is a very hopeful album. Another quick thought, Kodak Black rules. Now, I already know Kodak Black rules. I really liked this album from a couple years ago. I did a review of it. But I like that Kodak Black is his Playboy Cardi. like the way Kanye uses Playboy Cardi to show that, like, hip-hop is just the greatest, right? I mean, you know how much I love hip-hop. But, like, in theory, Kodak Black and Kendrick Lamar should be total opposites. And one of them's in and out of jail and is always rapping about drugs and guns and blah, blah, blah. And then Kendrick is the enlightened one, the good one. This album is a humanist album. This isn't an album about good or bad. This is not a preachy album. Their experiences may be different, their approach may be different, their style may be different, but this album completely unifies them and does that. And again, okay, so Kendrick Lamar was not out there at the Black Lives Matter rally with a sign. He wasn't. He didn't do that. He didn't give statements. But what more can you do than this? Than showing this unity between what is apparently completely divergent schools of thought and approach in African American popular culture, and instead showing their oneness, showing their connectedness. It's great. Which all ties in to one of the most important parts that this album is driving home. I've alluded to it a couple times. Kendrick Lamar is a humanist, not an activist. And this album emphasizes something which I believe to be very true, which is to be a humanist is much more difficult, rewarding, and important than being an activist. He is not trying to be a voice of a generation, not of Americans, not of African Americans, not of African Americans from Los Angeles, not of African Americans from stable yet turbulent households, not African Americans whose initials are KLD. No. He is a voice of all humanity, and that's what he's pushing for. He's trying to go beyond activism towards humanism. He's trying to actually unify us in our human condition. Now, he still emphasizes the inhuman ways that African Americans have been treated in our society, the crimes against humanity, which generation after generation they have suffered on our American soil. But he phrases them a lot more in the context of crimes against humanity as opposed to crimes against a race. And so I think what he did is he made something that is way more sophisticated and way more necessary than what we thought we wanted. We thought we wanted Kendrick to come out with a song called, I don't know, Black Lives Really Matter in 2020 and just blow up the world with his amazing rhymes and his flows and great beats and just have everyone say, just get all warm and cozy with this piece of activism that we can just chop up and put and say, this is America, and just say that we're all set. But he went way over that. The image that I had in my head initially was of Michael Jordan, just like dunking on somebody, just being way over them. But I think actually the way to think about this, I've been thinking about Los Angeles, and I just recently watched Winning Time, the HBO movie about the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, I'm from Boston, so it's hard for me to love that documentary, but god damn it, I love that documentary. There's a scene where Kareem Abdul-Jabbar explains the skyhook to Magic Johnson. And there's this whole beautiful thing here where Kareem Abdul-Lamar, where Kareem has this sort of like position of sort of world weariness. He's a veteran. He's seen the tragedy in life. He's seen how people are treated. And then Magic Johnson's this smiling guy, and they have a hard time. It's basically a frown and a smile. How do you get along? But there's the best scene in the whole show is Kareem explaining to Magic Johnson how he does his sky hook, which if you don't follow basketball, it's a shot where you shoot the ball over your head. And he's like 7 foot tall. So when he fully extends his arm behind his head and shoots while jumping, he's essentially like 13 feet in the air and nobody can touch him. And he describes it that like when you're the big man, everybody's crowding you and everybody's hacking at you and everybody on the court and everybody in the audience is staring at you, waiting for you to do something. And they're just like, all the attention's on you and all the pressure's on you and all the adversity is on you. But when you take this shot, you jump up into the sky and you reach your arm out and you are alone. That's how he phrases it. Kendrick Abdul-Jabbar, in this album is that sky hook, where everyone's looking at him and they're throwing elbows and they're waiting for him to do a jam or a shot or whatever it is. And instead of taking the activist field goal, instead of just taking a shot, instead of going for a dunk, he jumps all the way over everybody on the court. And he's alone. And he makes this piece of humanity. This amazing ode to the complex process of becoming an adult and coming to terms with trauma. Is it a masterpiece? You pillocks? Of course it is. Now, I said I was wrong. I said I was wrong before about the album and The Heart Part 5, how it got me ready for it. Because I thought this album was really going to be about different perspectives of African Americans. I thought it was going to be about sort of like the life of Marvin Gaye and the life of Michael Jackson and the life of Kobe and all that. But it actually ended up being more interesting because it is about different perspectives, but it's about different perspectives on self. So let's get to the production here. How much piano? Yes, a lot of piano. Not a lot of drums. This album is very futuristic in the way that it doesn't sound like anything else. This is where we have to like stop taking Kendrick Lamar for granted. And we have to stop taking his longtime producer, Soundwave, for granted. That's why this is here. This is a bootleg of the Transformer, who was the coolest Transformer. He was a cassette. He was a cassette player. Now, this is a bootleg, so it says Cassette Man on there. I bought this at the Transformers convention in Toronto. I was at the wrong hotel, and I ended up stumbling into a convention in Toronto. It was very funny. So that's Soundwave, and we just need to praise Soundwave. Like his name is all over this album. I think he's the primary producer. And I think he has been for a long time. And I think it might be time to just start calling these albums Kendrick Lamar and Soundwave, because there's just so much development, so much interesting instrumentation, so much strings and piano, but it never feels like they're doing that thing that rock artists do all the time, where they're like, excuse me, I am now going to use pianos and violins and take me seriously and give me the Grammys, me no rock no more. Okay? They're not doing that. None of this feels like an attempt to get recognition. It's just the soundscape that he's choosing for. And it's so good and it's so subtle. And I'm not going to get to all the details. I'm not going to get to all the details of the production. You're going to see me struggle with just one song, because I had to go, because I can't sit here all day. I still got to get all my grades in by Wednesday. The album's roughly in chunks of songs. Like there's the universal grief part, there's the father issue part, the woman issue part, the problems of can't please everybody, and then how to process trauma. Kind of all those all go together throughout the album. And I'm not going to do a very deep analysis of each of the songs, nor of the lyrics. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's just too rich. The other is that Kendrick Lamar gets a lot of respect for his lyrics. He gets a lot of analysis, and a lot of it, it'll be as good and better than whatever I would do. So I'm just going to keep adding skyness to this. But it's not going to be sort of like taking each line and analyzing it. So my stamp for the album, my example song, is the first track, Why Not? United in Grief. You can click on the banana to hear the song. So I counted 10 different parts to this song, but you hear it and it basically sounds like one or two. It starts off with Sandu singing this angelic chorus, I hope you find some peace of mind, while his wife, Whitney, tells him to tell the truth. At that point, we hear the first sounds of the tap dancing, the stepping going on, kind of staccato piano that goes along with the stepping, and he says, I've been going through something. He numbers all the days that he hasn't released an album, and it's clear he's going to be taking us on this process. And then he starts spitting more in his kind of higher, kind of whiny voice that he has, one of his flows, some background sounds, like backward sounds in the back, very rhythmic rapping, and then there's this just very jazzy chord on the piano. And then he starts yelling. He starts like, not yelling, 3/4 yelling. That's another one. He has like his yelling flow and his 3/4 yelling flow. I can't number all the flows on the album. I'm not going to do that either. Watch someone else to do that. I can't do that. You can do that in the comments if you want. Can you name all the different flows on this album? I can't, but this is what I'll call 3/4 yelling. I went and got me a therapist, crucial to the album. Popped a bottle of Claritin. Shout out to Claritin. You're going to hear me sneeze probably once in this video because my allergies are going nuts. I pop that Claritin like every day. And it's like whoa. He starts ending things with whoa, like more Spitfire raps, and then this like psychotically fast drum loop comes up. And we get to this chorus about getting a new Mercedes wagon, about buying all this stuff when he's younger. One of the big themes of this album is how useless it is to buy stuff. This goes back to a lot of the theories of Pascal, where he talks about diversions, divertissement. There used to be no word in French for fun. Just divertissement, which means to divert yourself from thinking about your own damnation and death, okay? So he talks about diversions, that the reason that we buy things and that we do things and that we have YouTube channels and that we have jobs and that we watch TV and that all these things, all the things that we could possibly do is because we can't just sit alone and think. And so we just buy stuff to divert ourselves. And so when he's younger and he's flossing and he's flexing and he's doing that, he's trying to reach a point in his life where he doesn't have to do that to have that meaning. And then we get to the refrain, which has the universal excuse of I grieve different. That is the universal excuse for your behavior. I grieve different. This cool kind of bloopy synths in the background. Again, one of these examples of Soundwave and its amazing production and the space in here. But the fast drum loop is still there. A little bit more like lugubrious synths in the back, and his voice is still fast. Some staccato strings come in the back. And then all of a sudden we have I grieve different with bowed strings. So played out very legato. And then the chorus comes back and the piano. And then the drums rock out and there's some more vocals in the back. And then the drums come back and there's some more backward sounds. I bought infinity pools I never swimmed in. God damn it, Kendrick. I almost called him Kanye. Kendrick. I bought infinity pools I never swimmed in. What a line. Because Kendrick knows that the past participle of swim is swam. But swimmed in has a much better sound. I watched Keem buy 4 cars in 4 months. Family dynamics. I'm going to repeat. His cousin, baby Keem, or his nephew. I'm not actually sure what the relationship is. Brother. Spiritual brothers, rap brothers, range brothers. He was a lot younger than him, making the same mistakes he made. So it's great because he has this kind of foil who's doing all the things that he used to do. And this doesn't make anybody happier. You can't really wipe your tears away with money. So now we're into the 10th part. So the 7th part was the bowed strings. The 8th part was the chorus coming back. The 9th part was the drums coming back. The 10th part is strings and whining sounds over I Grieve Different. And when I heard him first say I Grieve Different, I got mad. I said, this isn't going to be good. Kendrick, you have to understand that everybody grieves differently. That's what makes grief the way that it is. And that's part of the reason that we have problems in our life, is that we expect everybody to grieve the way that we grieve. And when other people don't grieve the way we do, we make judgments on them. So Kendrick, you have missed it. You've just missed it. I'm sorry. This is an interesting idea. And then what does Kendrick do? Kendrick says in the background with another one of his 17,000 voices, this guy's like Jeff Dunham. God damn it. How many different voices does he have? Everybody grieves different. World's best Kendrick impersonation. Everybody grieves different. I sound like a Simpsons character. Everybody grieves different. I sound like Chief Wiggum. Break them away, toys. Everybody grieves different. So he got it. He didn't mess up. This is that universal humanity that he's talking about. Everybody grieves different. That's the point of the whole damn album. We are united in grief, not because we all grieve the same things, but because we all grieve. In this way, he's a lot like a 20th century philosopher, a French existentialist, okay? Existentialism is a term that's thrown around a lot, but the primary idea is all human beings are united in the fact that we're all going to die. That's the one thing we all know. We are totally equal before death. So that makes life basically meaningless. It makes life a joke because we're all going to die, so what's the point of doing anything? The only way to find meaning in life is by creating human connections with others. That's the point of existentialism. It's not just like, we're all going to die, and it's sad. It's actually an uplifting philosophy if you really look into it. I mean, some variations of existentialism do it, we're all going to die, but it actually goes a little bit deeper than that. So this song does that. This is why I'm talking about this album as being a great masterpiece of humanity, because here we are. Everybody grieves different. And in that difference, we are all grieving in the same way, right? If we all grieve different, then we all grieve the same because we're all grieving differently. My head's going to explode. You see why I can't do this for every single song? Then the 11th part is just a piano outro, announcing the tone of the album, how much piano, yes, and the melody of the album, and it leads right into the next song, N95, where he starts singing like a kid's song. So much movement in this production. I think this is basically just a redo of the song Family Ties, the production. He starts with this one flow of talking about take off this, take off that, take off the fake deep, take off the fake woke. If you're a fan of comedy in the 80s and late 70s, there was a Canadian duo, Bob and Doug McKenzie, played by Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis, and they're like, it's a Canadian slang saying take off, hoser. So I'd like to imagine a version of this, like, take off the fake smiles, hoser. Anyways, take off the fake deep, take off the fake woke, on and on, playing with this, which leads into this chorus of, once you take everything off, you're ugly as F word. And I don't think this is an insult. I think this is more of a universality, okay? We are all ugly underneath. We are all grieving a different way, and we're all ugly. I didn't understand this song that much until I saw that it was the first single, and then I realized just saying, you're out of pocket is a great hook. Like, let's just remember, too, that he also knows how to write hooks. A totally different flow in the second verse, and then halfway through the second verse, a totally different flow on top of that. You fungus smellers, what more do you want? A quiet bridge with chorus and harmony in the third verse with another flow, fast and whiny, and then he changes it again before the end of the verse and asks us a question. Would you sell your soul on credit? Would you? The outro talks about cancel culture, a little bit, I don't know, kind of a grimy outro, almost Yeezus-y, and this is where he refers to himself as Oprah. So with all my excitement of those first two songs, you think that those would be my favorite, but actually my favorite song probably on this entire album is track number 3, Worldwide Steppers. Starts off with Kodak Black, Oklahoma, Eckhart Tolle. This really weird and awesome sample with this orchestra that develops really well to this very kind of choppy thing, and then piano notes are added to it. This is where he doesn't rhyme. Like he talks about dancing with my daughter to Baby Shark while there's sharks outside. Check your rhyme dictionary if side and shark rhyme. He talks about his life as a father. This is one of these big themes here, about his growth here. And then he has this whole bit. Sciatica nerve pinch, don't know how to feel like the first time I effed a white bee. This whole theory about him having sex with white women and the guilt and the shame and the anger and the vengeance and the taboo. It's masterful storytelling. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. The way that he is addressing the ways that he has coped in the past. It's great. It's necessary. Because many rap artists will rap about doing that. And some will even kind of hint at the meaning of it. But here he goes directly at it. You are so confronted with trying to process, what does this mean? What does the sexual act between these two people mean? Once in LA, Inglewood, I think he said, once in Copenhagen. Like, what does it actually mean? Then there's this just totally sick beat change, just for a few bars. And then we go in this whole question of like, I'm a killer, you're a killer, he's a killer, B-word. And then he even goes, the noble person that goes to work and pray like they supposed to, slaughter people too, your murder is just a bit slower. And in this way, full circle, we are united in grief. And we are united in creating grief. We are all killers. We all create badness for other people. We all exploit others. We are all killers in different ways. We're united in grief. Next song is called Die Hard. I'm not going to talk about the song. It's fine. It's good. It's cool. He can sing. Good job. You can sing. I like Blast. Fine. Amanda Reefer's fine. But this album's too long for me to spend too much time on songs I don't like that much, especially when the next song is called Father Time. Crazy kind of like classical sounding beginning with the stomping, backward sounds, a backward soul sample, and then eventually just leads into a straightforward sample. Beautiful chorus by Sampha. I would have liked more by him. The mother issue says, you've got to go to therapy. And then the line on the album, I've got daddy issues, that's on me. So when you go to therapy, people often say, do you just go to therapy to complain about your parents? Isn't that what you're doing? Are you just going to escape responsibility? And why am I making that face? Anyways. But that's the opposite of what you're doing. You see, if you don't go to therapy, if you don't process your trauma that your parents caused you, you will always be living that trauma out and blaming them, just not really knowing it. When you go to therapy and you understand the ways that your parents have traumatized you, like, or family members, doesn't have to be parents, could be grandparents, uncles, brothers, anybody, whatever it was, whoever raised you, that's how you can grow through it. So when he says, I got daddy issues, that's on me, that's totally correct. If you have daddy issues, that's on you. That's not on your daddy. You're an adult now. Like, you have to process it. It might have been their creation, but it's your responsibility. And you have to face it. So he has this whole beautiful verse about how his father messed him up without ever accusing him of actual abuse. He's not saying, my daddy burned me with cigarettes and put car batteries attached to my testicles. Nothing like that. His dad was just emotionally detached, was overly competitive, was harsh and uncaring. So it's amazing because, of course, we have a lot of rap songs and a lot of discourse around the concept of absent fathers in African American communities, and especially in rap music, right? Like the number, I don't know the numbers of African American households without fathers, but for rap artists, the percentage is considerably higher than the national average, right? So it's interesting here that absent fathers are not the only problem. Abusive fathers are not the only problem. Just plain old bad fathers. They're there. Need assistance with the way I was brought up? What's the difference when your heart is made of stone and your mind is made of gold and your tongue is made of sword, but it may weaken your soul? Beautiful. Mittens ain't got no daddy. grow up overcompensating, learning ish about being a man, disguising as being gangsta. Just beautiful. Just beautiful. A beautiful idea, and he ties it all together, and it's on him. This album is him showing, him taking his responsibility so that he can be there holding on to his daughter on the cover. Next up is the Rich Interlude, with beautiful piano all the way throughout this album by Duval Timothy. I don't know who Duval Timothy is, but Duval Timothy is a great piano player who's all over this album. The two interludes on this album are like some of the best interludes in rap history. This one has this like piano going nuts, getting kind of big and getting kind of plunky at the same time. Kodak Black is on here and he's just beautiful. Talking about being a bunch of lost souls in survival mode. This is following up the previous song. It's about like here's somebody who didn't have a father and his experience and about his life. And just the piano gets more and more lush and then it gets staccato and it's just so beautiful. And again, are they the opposite? Are Kendrick and Kodak opposite, or are they both people who chronicle trauma? Is that what they're doing? Okay. Rich Spirit, again, another great song. I think it's primarily by Sound. I can't figure out who's doing what in terms of production because so many people do so much. Kind of bloopy synthesizers and snaps and dynamics. And we have this whisper flow, which is used throughout the album, where Kendrick just basically whispers. I like how he refers to himself as being an aloof Buddha. That's kind of an interesting idea. I do think he comes across as aloof. And I think that's some of those boundaries. We're going to come to those boundaries later. Eventually breaks into sort of the range brother flow, where he uses the word brother over and over again. New flows, brother. We Cry Together is the next song, which I'm never going to listen to again in my entire life. I will never, ever listen. I've listened to it to review this, and I am done. It's a great song, and I will never listen to it again. It's like Lars von Trier's Dancer in the Dark. Fine movie. I'm never going to watch it again. I'm not going to put myself through that. No, thank you. This is a song about a couple that's fighting, and it's so and it's over a great Alchemist beat. Like, how cool is it to hear like underground boom bap sounds with Kendrick? It's just great. My one problem with the song is that it ends with the couple having sex. And that kind of puts it a little bit too much in the "Love the Way You Lie," zone there. But of course, it really is a very deep fight that's actually about insecurity, about how financial precariousness can lead to problems in relationships. Fundamentally, it's about how we're socialized as men and women in a way that creates problems between us, about how the way that we're socialized as men and women turns us both into victims and victimizers. And of course, there's a lot of awesome, crazy punchlines. They're really low blows, just low blow after low blow, like sounds in the background, increasingly violent. And it's too real, and I'm never going to listen to it again. And I'm happy that it's there, though, because it leads into Purple Hearts, which here is the resolution of that. This is him being in a happy relationship. Stop tap dancing around the conversation, says his wife / fiance / therapist. And this song right here. So I was talking about how this album has been a process, and so I listened to it. I listened to it on the way to graduation, and I listened to it on the way back from graduation, and I listened to it driving to Saratoga. This is the song where I was sitting in the Stewart's shops. There's a thing in upstate New York called Stewart's. They like ice cream. It's kind of cool. And I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting for my daughter to come back from the medal ceremony, and I'm listening to the album again. And I'd never liked Purple Hearts. I actually disliked it on first listen. I'm like, this is not it. This is not good. I can't believe it. But this time I'm listening. And because I found out that my daughter won a medal. And so I'm in kind of a good mood now. And it's this blasting synthesizers and these funky drums and this cool, like development. It's just so good. It's just such a great, soul song and rap song. And then the whole theme, shut the F up when love is talking. That's the answer. The answer to the previous song is just to shut up when love is talking, to listen to love, to feel that connection. I'm not in the music business. I'm in the human business. That's what he says, and that's what's true. Beautiful. Just that's the theme that we need to have. That's the connections that we need to have right there. That's the answer. Summer Walker sings on here. Toby's having a nightmare, and his feet are tapping against the glass. Let's see. Can you see him? Hey, Toby, you're having a nightmare, buddy. You want to wake up? Okay. There may be more popular music reviewers on YouTube, and there may be better music reviewers on YouTube, but nobody wakes up their dog from a nightmare in the middle of a Kendrick Lamar video like I do. So like this whole song has the Summer Walker verse, and she's just great. And I think she has one of the great lyrics in music history. It ain't love if you gonna judge me for my past. No, it ain't love if you ain't never eat my ass. This is a perfect lyric. I understand it's crude, but it's perfect. It's true. And I'm saying eat my ass as a literal, but really metaphorical. Like be all in it. Like not in it. I don't mean it. I don't mean the it. I mean like it. You understand what I'm saying? You need to be completely in it. In the relationship. Give your all. As vulnerable as you can be. And you have to forgive people for their past. This is the recipe for a good relationship. And it doesn't actually require analingus, right? That's not a prerequisite. But emotional analingus. God damn it. Did I just say that? Damn it. An hour in, and I just coined a term called emotional analingus. This is my legacy. This is my legacy to the world. And then Ghostface Killah comes on. And this is why I was disappointed. Because if you don't know, Ghostface Killah is probably my second or third favorite rapper of all time. I just think he's the best. I just love him. And he has a couple different modes. But like, he has a crying mode and then he has an attacking mode. It's like Kendrick, who's one of the best, and Ghostface, when he's one of the best, they're going to be on a song together. Maybe they're just going to like go bar for bar and just have like a final rap bar battle. Or maybe you can sing about love. God damn it. I hated it. I hated that that's what they did. But that's the thing. Why is Ghost so good? Because he basically invented this kind of whining, crying rap on the album The W, right? Very underrated Wu-Tang Clan album, you know? And he's just brilliant. Talking about washing Jesus's feet. True story. My brother, when he graduated college for a couple of years, whenever you go to visit him, he would wash your feet. It was weird, but it was sweet. Just a really great song. And that's the end of the first side. And then we get to the Tolle side, side B. More about Mr. Morale, about overcoming trauma, about recognizing our humanity. The first song, Count Me Out, again, this kind of chorus comes in, a little bit more therapist talk, where you actually hear Eckhart Tolle say Mr. Duckworth. It's kind of a chorus, like a guitar-based song. His rapping is just great. At a certain point, like almost like a school chorus pops up. Even my strong points couldn't survive if I didn't learn to love myself, forgive myself 100 times. Radical empathy starts with accepting yourself. And then at a certain point, it gets almost like Damn-like. It goes from To Pimp a Butterfly style to Damn style, like a trap beat, and kind of singing on here. And again, he's just like, at a certain point towards the end, he gets very Donda, where he has kind of like a slow triplet flow. This is me and I am blessed. Oh yeah, this is me and I'm blessed. I mean, this really sounds like it's right off of Donda. Anybody fighting through stress. The song Crown, which he might have produced himself, I can't quite tell. This is the song that really convinced me that it's a masterpiece. It was on my fifth listen to this song. It was when we were in the hotel and my daughter was asleep. I think I was battling in Pokemon in the Ultra League. And I was listening to the album at the same time. And I just heard this song. I'm like, oh my God. Is this rap music? Is this the next phase of rap music? What is this? This gentle piano, the simple line, and like this doubled voice and added piano, and then these strings come in high and sweet, and then just repeating over and over again, can't please everybody, singing basically like a jazz singer. You can't please everybody? Do you know how much I need to understand that? Do you know how important that is for some people to hear? Like I'm a chair of my department, and sometimes there's disagreements in the department, and it's my job to reconcile. But sometimes some people are going to be upset. Can't please everybody. Sometimes in my family, we have to make decisions as parents or as a father. Can't please everybody. Sometimes there's difficulty with my birth family and like my new family and my maid family. Like my brothers and my dad, and then can't please everybody. You just can't please everybody. You just can't please everybody. And Kendrick is telling us that as a way to help us forgive ourselves and as a way for him to forgive himself. Heavy is the head that wears the crown is the line that he changes. Heavy is the head that chose to wear the crown. Again, talking about his place in hip-hop, basically moving past that, saying he is not going to wear the crown. Talks about buying a new car and how it doesn't help, going back again and again to these kinds of themes about how material goods are not going to get us out. Then we get to the song Silent Hill, interesting kind of opening singing, and then we get to like kind of a trap beat with the sound of like a silencer, kind of trappish. I don't like this beat. Like, it's funny. It's kind of like whiplash going from Crown to this as far as like the different styles of production. Here's something I never thought I would say. Kodak Black out-rapped Kendrick Lamar. It's true. I mean, I was introduced by Kendrick Lamar through the comedy of Chris D'Elia, who I know is a controversial figure, but he is one of the best rap impersonators there's ever been. His Eminem is amazing. And just look up Chris D'Elia does Kodak Black. It's very funny. He's able to imitate the style quite perfectly. So I didn't take him that seriously until I listened to his music, and it turns out he's really great. But just his verse on here is just so good. It's a really, really strong verse. Then we hear the first actual quote from Eckhart Tolle leading into the Savior interlude. This is almost as good as the other interlude, maybe even better. Like the first one had all piano, this one's all strings with the string. I think it's a quartet that gets built. We have Baby Keem. Baby Keem and Kodak Black both serve as like foils, as like representations of Kendrick's less developed self. So like he's still in contact with them, that kind of like younger, more materialistic self, right? But Baby Keem delivers what's maybe the best verse on the album as far as like rapping. Like the fastball, remember I was talking about how he's not throwing that 4-finger fastball anymore? Baby Keem is. And this whole album is great. And this whole verse is just great. He just goes harder than Kendrick. He just rhymes better than Kendrick. He's not a better artist on this album, but I think that's a fair thing to say. He makes reference to, you ever see your mama strung out while you study division? It's funny because at some point Kendrick mentions Baby Keem's mother being an addict and working through it, and it's very kind of moving and meaning in this whole theme of generational trauma. Next song is called Savior. Kind of a piano and tap dance to open, weird opening, like sounds. And then eventually a real drum beat comes in, almost Latin, with like strings. It's just so beautiful. Again, this is why I can't spend, because I'm an hour and 6 minutes in here. And like I could spend 20 minutes trying to describe this beat. I love how he talks about being not your savior over and over again, that these different rappers are not your savior. I like it when pro-black, but I'm more Kodak Black. Again, these great step sounds. Baby Keem does this chorus. Kendrick seems to be attacking this concept of being a black screen protest, and I'm a full-time protest. Are you happy for me? Kendrick has this great verse about the vaccine and the way it's interpreted. Seen a Christian say the vaccine mark of the beast, then he caught COVID and prayed to Pfizer for relief. Then I caught COVID and started to question Kyrie. Will I stay organic or hurt in this bed for 2 weeks? I mean, Kyrie Irving is a basketball player who I loved. I loved when he was on the Celtics. And now he's not on the Celtics anymore, and he's the worst basketball player of all time. He's just terrible. I hate him. I'm just kidding. He's fine. But he's a very prominent anti-vaxxer, flat earther. So it's interesting and funny the way this is posited. And I've seen a lot of commentary online putting forth the idea that Kendrick is an anti-vaxxer. And it's just not the case. He's just commenting on it. He's being a moralist. He's observing this debate and talking about it. Kendrick can really sing. Like you hear that on the bridge. Like I didn't realize how well he could sing. This whole album is like... how do you say it? How do young people say it? Low key, like a demo tape of how well he can sing. A really beautiful section too about trauma and about Tupac is dead. You got to think for yourself. And this is where we come into again that sense of boundaries. So when we're talking about the importance of boundaries, the thing that he's drawing up here is that he is not going to be that guy. So just leave him alone. You want him to be that guy. You want him to be the protest guy. You want him to be Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, okay? Or Chuck D. But he's not going to be that guy. Or Tupac. He's not going to be that guy. And that's his boundary. And he's emphasizing it all the time. The next song is Auntie Diaries. Good God, I'm just at Auntie Diaries. Let's talk about Auntie Diaries, huh? Heart plays in ways that mind can't figure out. So musically, it's an interesting song. He 2 times on this album, he does this trick where he just whispers all the way through, and then he builds up this huge crescendo, and it's just a absolute smack across the face with its emotional punch, with these drums coming out of where these strings getting so meaningful. And there is a lot of discourse around this song as well. It is a song about 2 family members who are trans. A trans man and a trans woman. A trans man who he used to refer to as his aunt, and a trans woman who is his cousin, whose dead name was Demetrius and whose new name is Marianne. Now, there's problematic nature to the song. Okay, he uses the wrong pronouns all the way through. He keeps referring to saying my auntie is a man now is actually disrespectful because she's not an aunt, she's an uncle. Okay, like that's the respectful way to speak. Okay. No, Toby, no. Oh my God, he's jumping on top of all my papers. He just failed to jump up on top of the couch. Okay, good. You know, that is not correct. It is not cool, and I'm not speaking facetiously here. Okay, it is not cool to, when referring to Marianne, to refer to her as Demetrius or to refer to her as him. It is not okay. He also uses the F slur for gay men. And that is not okay for non-gay people, for hetero people to use the F slur. It is not okay. But here's the question. Do you want ideological purity? Or do you want to make the world a better place, a safer place, a more equitable place for all humans? What do you want? Do you want someone who can effectively fight homophobia and transphobia? Or do you want somebody who uses the correct words that you believe in? Do you want an activist or a humanist? That's what Kendrick has done here. He's not somebody who looks good and says the right thing for a limited audience. Okay? He is somebody who is desperately, intelligently, and effectively using words to communicate meaning and affect change. He is not saying the F word. He is using the F word. And those things are actually different. And I understand in the climate that we live in, and I don't mind if you're upset with me. I don't. It's okay. You can tell me why I'm wrong. You can make reaction videos. I'm okay. Like, seriously, I understand that what I'm saying might be controversial and might be problematic itself, okay? But there's a difference in saying and using. I don't think in his daily life Kendrick Lamar would use the F slur. I don't think that he thinks it is a good word to use. I don't think that he is somebody who would intentionally misgender someone or intentionally misuse a pronoun. But he is trying to reach an audience. Hip-hop music is terribly transphobic. And it has been for a long time. Biz Markie, love him. I happen to skip the song called The Thing Named Kim. Eazy-E. If you know the bank robbing song, Nobody Move, Nobody Gets Burned, you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of homophobia in hip-hop culture, okay? I mean, I listen to rappers who use the F slur in 2022, and so do you. And you hear it, and you give a cultural pass. Now, that cultural pass is racist. Now, first of all, it's very important to emphasize that when I'm talking about hip-hop culture, I'm not talking about African-American culture. There is no evidence that the African-American culture is more homophobic or transphobic than white Americans or than Latino Americans. It's a question of a bad sampling bias, okay? So there is no evidence, okay? I understand it feels that way to some people, but that's just based on your biases, okay? We are all equally homophobic and transphobic in this country, okay? But hip-hop culture, now that is different. Hip-hop culture is more homophobic than pop culture, than rock culture, than indie culture, than polka culture, okay? So by making this song And by including these words, he's speaking in a real way that the audience can understand. It is not passing the litmus test of what is appropriate for me, okay? I don't like it. I listened to the song with my daughter on the way back from the trip, and she said, oh, every time I hear that word, I just get upset. I understand what he's doing, but ooh, I don't like hearing it either. But he's actually making a change. He's actually reaching people who have not even really been engaged with. Of course, there are trans rappers, and there are people in the hip-hop community who fight for gay rights. But what's their reach? Who can they reach? They can basically reach the people who already agree with them. Kendrick Lamar is going all the way out on a limb on this song, all the way out at the very end of the limb. And he is saying trans rights are human rights. That's what this song is about. And if you believe that trans rights are human rights like I do, then we need to applaud this man and not have the short-sighted thing of he said F slow, that's bad. Now listen, I have no use right now to use the N-word. There's no good reason why I should use that word right now, and I'm not going to. But I could use it to exemplify something, to explain something, without it being the same as just saying it. I can utter those 6 words, 6 letters, without having that same meaning behind it. So, why would I do that? In what condition would I do that? If I could use the N-word and I think I could actually reach people to be less racist, I'd use it all the time. I would. If me using the N-word meant that I could get less people to be hateful, people to be less racist, of course I would use it. It would be for the greater good. Okay. I don't know. Please tell me, like seriously, my comment section is the greatest comment section on the internet. And part of the thing is that I'm not defensive, okay? So you can tear my reasoning apart, and I totally believe that the other side of the argument, I totally understand it, okay? But I think what he's doing here is absolutely heroic. And it would not have the reach, the power, the verisimilitude that it needs to reach the audience if he did it in accordance with politically correct speech. And I'm not using politically correct as a bad term. Political correctness is a good thing. It is a unequivocal good in our society that's been tarnished by racists. He's not using politically correct language to make a better world. And then he starts attacking the church. He starts attacking the church for their homophobia. And I think by extension, he's attacking not just religion, but the culture. I think he is talking about the hip-hop culture when he's attacking the church. He even says, I knew you was conflicted, tying back to Pimp a Butterfly, but I knew you was conflicted being, how conflicted must you be to be trans and Christian? Do you know how many trans Christian people there are and how many trans Christian people there have been? Do you understand what it must be like to believe that, one, that you are not the sex that you were born into, you're not the gender that you were born into, and that means that the thing you believe most in the world means you're going to go to hell? Do you understand how unpleasant that must be? And what does Kendrick do? He creates this line when he's talking to the minister and the strings are going, and I don't always get goosebumps, but I'm getting goosebumps now, like major from this. He asks the question of the preacher, shall we love our neighbor? Shall we love our neighbor? Not should. Shall. The weird future tense that we have just for the verb to be. Shall we love our neighbor? Beautiful. Just a beautiful, amazing question that we're asking. Shall we love our neighbor? Shall we live up to our Christian beliefs? And if we do live up to our Christian beliefs, then that means we must believe that trans rights are human rights. We must believe that gay people and trans people, LGBTQIA+, are absolutely equals and need equal love. That's what the song's about. That's what Kendrick did. And that's what I'm talking about, him being Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with the sky hook. Because he could have just done an activist song. He could have just like bunched around and said, great. And all the people on the far left wing and all the people who know that Christianity is flawed and all of them would have clapped and said, oh, good job, Kendrick, you did it. You're just speaking to us. Instead, he's 7 feet over the floor with his arms extended out, 12 more feet, scraping his knuckles against the roof of the goddamn forum, getting ready to shoot this bomb of humanity, which equalizes us all before God, going over Christianity and over cultural biases against these superficial differences of whether or not we wear dresses or believe that we are women or men or whatever. Is it a masterpiece? Is that even a good question anymore? Then, thank God, he breaks up the song Mother I Sober and Auntie Diaries with Mr. Morale. Pharrell comes in. Pharrell is everywhere. Pharrell's on Pusha T. Pharrell's on Jack Harlow. Great Jaws-like opening. Almost like a arpeggiator beat. He kind of like raps like Pharrell. Like Kendrick takes a Pharrell thing. He references his son, Enoch, your father's detoxed. He's really going in. Right now we're in this whole abuse thing. So the last song was about the abuse that his aunt suffered and that his cousin suffered for being misgendered and mistreated in the way that people couldn't believe that they were transgender, explaining what it was like to be transgender before any of the rights that have been pushed forward through our progress in the last couple of years. He has an amazing take on being trans in the 90s in Los Angeles, okay? And now here we are talking about the trauma that's experienced. He talks about R. Kelly and R. Kelly being sexually abused and trying to get us to have sympathy for R. Kelly, which I hate to tell you, but I have sympathy for R. Kelly. Now that sympathy ends when he starts victimizing other people. He should be in jail. But you have to have sympathy up until that point where he victimizes other people because he was a victim too. And it just gets more, and again, just so much emotion in here in these strings. And then he asks the question, what do you know about black trauma? Now, I did watch a little bit of Fantano's reaction, a little bit of Sean C's reaction. And as you know, I hope, recently I think Sean C he's just been on another level. Like he found some other gear and he's just being a lot, I've always liked his stuff, but he's just really, really he's gotten a lot better at it, I think, in the last couple months. Maybe that's just my perception. But he was commenting on this, and then he expressed anger at the way that white people talk about black trauma. And I want to accept that fact. And first of all, apologize if that's unpleasant, because I talk about black trauma a lot on my channel. But I want to clarify, I want to have a sort of one-sided conversation here and explain why I talk about black trauma. I talk about black trauma because white people's inclination is to deny it. Okay? That's our inclination. Our inclination is not to believe it. The same way that men's inclination is not to believe what women go through. I don't believe how much women are talked over, are dismissed. I don't believe how much racism black people face every single day of their life. I don't believe it. Like on my initial take, I can't imagine it because I've never suffered through any form of alterity in my entire life, except when I went to Japan and everyone thought I was Brad Pitt just because I was white. But that's not exactly suffering, right? So I've never suffered from being the other. I've never suffered from being marginalized. And when you've never suffered from being marginalized, it is super hard to believe how bad it is for everybody else. So when I talk about black trauma, it's not because I think I understand it. I don't. I don't even come close to understanding it. I understand black trauma as much as I understand the difficulty of being trans or the difficulty of being a woman. I understand black trauma as much as I know what my dog was having a nightmare about. It's something completely outside of myself that I've never had to live through. So I don't pretend to understand it at all. I talk about it, and I hope other white people talk about it as a way of just saying, I believe you. I believe it. I believe it is true. If conservatives in this country would believe what black people are telling them about their experience and not say, well, you can still buy your bootstraps, and, well, what about the black cops, and what about Chicago and the death rate? If we just, as a country, just believed people when they said they were suffering, when they said they were traumatized. Like Kendrick believed his uncle and his cousin. He just believed them. That's why Kendrick was a great little kid, because he believed it. He just believed it. Just, hey, I'm a woman. Great, you're a woman. Hey, I'm a man. Awesome, you're a man. If we just believe each other, that's how we're going to get in touch with that humanity. So I don't know. I am interested. I know I do have some African American viewers and some black viewers from all over the world. I am interested in what your opinion is about white people talking about black trauma, because I'm really just saying I believe it. And that's part of the reason why I like hip-hop so much, because it helps me. It's a constant reminder. It doesn't help me. It helps the country. It helps the world. It makes us face those things and understand them and believe them. You know what I mean? Great beat change on here. Not just the arpeggiator, where it's just the arpeggiator. His high voice is over everything. Then we have an appearance of Tana Leone, who is the other rapper on PG Lang. He's good, but not spectacular. I don't know. I don't get the sense that he's maybe the future. I don't know. And then we get to Mother I Sober. So I posted to Instagram the picture of me listening to this album, and I got so into it that I forgot to put my shoes on. And then I put my shoes on, and I was a little bit late getting ready for graduation. And I'm sitting in my office, and I hear Mother I Sober. And I did take a picture of my crying face, which I'm not going to share. I thought maybe that'd be interesting, but I could not stop crying from the song because it so perfectly describes the cycle of abuse, these intertwining stories. It so beautifully describes how to get out of it while also talking about it. It's just so beautifully done. The piano reminds me a little bit of Christmas Time Is Here, or the sad song from Arrested Development. But of course, it develops much more. He talks about his sensitivity. He talks about his mother's suffering. He talks about how his mother keeps asking him if he was abused, and it turns out it's because she was abused. And he keeps talking about how hard it is to confront things sober. And what's great is he says he doesn't do drugs. So what does sober mean? When you confront something sober, it means you have to confront something with a clear mind. So he's not distracting himself. He's not distracting himself with drugs or alcohol or his vice of choice, sex. He's not distracting himself. How hard is it to actually confront difficult things with a clear mind without distracting yourself, to just confront them? Beth Gibbons of Portishead sings on here. Hey, we had a Portishead reunion in music. The dude, Jeff Barrow from Portishead, played on the Arcade Fire album. And here we have Beth on Kendrick Lamar. I think she won out. This is a much better album than that Arcade Fire album. But check out that review too. I think this whole album is just this whole song is the emotional core of the album. Oh, also another thing that might stop you from seeing things sober is Christianity as well. And I think that there's a whole other theme to this album about moving away from Christianity more towards a theme of individual responsibility and a love of nature, like replacing the reliance on Jesus Christ as a figure who is going to save us and keep us in connection with the greatness of God, and instead moving towards nature. It's still a very similar spirituality, just with a different focus. Just as crazy verse, a conversation not being addressed in black families, the devastation haunting generations of humanity. They raped our mothers, they raped our sisters, they made us watch, they made us rape each other, psychotic torture between our lives, we ain't never recovered. Just a very clear line about this generational trauma, really hammering it home. You know, Billy Woods, his album recently, Ethiops, is a great album. I did a review on that as well. And he talks a lot about generational trauma as well. And it's great. It is so important that we're seeing this being addressed, because it's been a part of hip-hop since the very beginning, but it's being addressed directly now. Rappers coping with trauma, talking about how they get tattoos and they wear jewels, but talking about sexual trauma. Maybe my favorite YouTuber, like maybe number one, is FD Signifier, and he keeps teasing that he's eventually going to do a video about about sexual abuse of black boys and how present it is in African American culture. And I've wanted to contact him, just be like, are you worried about like sponsorship? Because like how much does it cost to like, what does Curiosity Stream pay? Because like I think we could raise up enough money, because that's going to be a great essay. But this is so essential. He's talking about these cycles of abuse and the way, and the chains and the tattoos and the cars. They're different ways of distracting ourselves, right? And then it ends with his daughter saying, "Thank you, Daddy, for breaking the cycle of abuse." And I cried and 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 cried. Because that's our greatest task in life. How can we break the cycles of abuse? And I think I did it. And other people very, very close to me, I don't want to out them, because that's not my story to tell. But it's like really important if we can do it. If you can, like, actually stop it. Like whatever it was that your mom did or your dad did, if you can like actually stop it, like actually break the wheel. It's amazing. And so he takes us so dark into it. He takes us like so into this, like with the raping and the darkness. And then he kind of takes us out in the end with the song Mirror, where it's kind of a more upbeat song. Almost reminds me of Wanna Be Starting Something a little bit. The sort of Manu Dibango Soul Masoka sample there. It's kind of like a weird upbeat song. And then the singing is coming back. And he keeps talking about like, I choose me. And again, this is not selfish. This is like modeling behavior. He's like modeling behavior. He is showing us. These are those boundaries again. He's choosing himself. Personal gain off my pain is nonsense. Faith in one man is a ship sinking. Beautiful lyrics. Sorry I didn't save the world, my friend. I was too busy building mine again. Earlier in the song, he says that he's deep in the valley of silence. Like he's trying to heal and he's trying to be there. And he's saying what you need to do is get a mirror. And this is a lot like Eckhart Tolle, like coming to terms with who you are. It's a lot like Pascal, again, just to sit alone in a room without divertissement, without diversions, and just sit there and confront yourself and just be there and work through and see if you can do what he did with this album. Process your trauma, take responsibility for the ways in which you're coping with trauma, hurt other people, forgive yourself, achieve some kind of real stability centered around your growth and with your connection to others, and enforce your boundaries. The great thing is my daughter, she's amazing. When she heard him say, I chose me, I'm sorry, she goes, you shouldn't apologize. And that's right. Don't apologize. All right, dear Lord. Well, my family is probably hungry as hell. So let's get to my Patreons here. These are all people who give me money, and I'm going to buy this album as soon as I can. So thank you to their support. I think I need to come up with a new system because y'all are just too generous. Got a little bit of the dragon going on here. Jeez. So these are some of the new folks. Sorry your names are kind of small on there. Matthew, John, and Fight. But thank you for supporting. Thank you for jumping on there. I really appreciate it. Oh, and also, so at graduation, I have one student who graduated, Sophie, she's a really good student of mine, and it turns out that her boyfriend, Navi, is like a fan of my show, and like one time like they were hanging out together, and she was like, "Why is my professor on your computer?" And so it turns out, so I want to give him a shout out. I met him at graduation, because they all got together, and so we shook hands and we talked about the Kendrick album. I'm like, hey, you want to shout out on the Kendrick review? It's like, yeah, sure. It's like, well, apparently he didn't like Damn, but he did like To Pimp a Butterfly, and he was very interested in some of the African rhythms. I think he was talking about the song Mirror. Anyways, it was a very fun and nice conversation. So I don't usually do those shout outs, but there you go. All right. Whew. Until next time. I'm about to pass out. This is an emotionally harrowing experience going through this wonderful album. But for all the rest of us Smellfungi, there's the camera.